This is why I say subscribe and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Ohio State Buckeyes live a couple hours early on a Wednesday, but we always make it happen. Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports at Bucknuts, and of course our double scoop from Buckeyes Scoop. Kevin Noon, Tony Gerdeman making it happen there again at Buckeyes Scoop. Gentlemen, edition 156. How we doing today?
Doing great.
All right. Yeah. Steve, we'll start with you in regards to transfer portal news. There's been a couple Buckeyes hit the portal, and one came out the other end in Los Angeles, one Bryson Shaw. So he the most recognizable and accomplished Buckeye of the group. But Marcus Hooker, also, of course, of the Malik Hooker clan family, entering the transfer portal as well. So your thoughts about the recent entries?
Well, I'm not losing a lot of sleep over the guys who have left Ohio State. They had to pare down their scholarship roster a little bit to get under the 85 limit, and they have more than successfully done that. Marcus Hooker, the last one to go in, puts them now down at 84. So they can actually now go into the portal and find somebody at a position of need if they want, maybe an offensive lineman who could come in and be in the two deep and provide depth or push a start right now this season. I don't know what other glaring spots that they really need to fill at this point. But yes, Bryson Shaw going to USC. Reunited, and it feels so good with Grinch, the guy who pounded the table for him at Ohio State. Grinch loves him some Shaw, and now they are reunited, and it feels so good at USC, and going to win the Pac-12 with Lincoln Riley as their head coach in the first year. So, and whether Bryson Shaw is going to start at safety for USC or not, may determine whether or not they win the Pac-12 championship or not. So I kid. I'm just kidding, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw. So beyond that, you had two guys, LeJon Cavazos and Jacoby Cowan, both moved down to North Carolina to play there. Cormonte Hamilton is going to Memphis, where he is reunited, and it feels so good with Matt Barnes. Let's see. Marcus Hooker just entered the portal. If there's a school out there that needs a guy who falls asleep at the drive-through window and, is the brother of an accomplished NFL player, then so be it. Maybe there'll be a taker for him. But I don't see a whole lot here to where I'm losing a lot of sleep. I thought Noah Potter was maybe a little short-sighted jumping in because I think he could have helped them a little bit at defensive end, particularly if somebody got hurt. But, I guess he thinks maybe he's going to start or play more plays somewhere else. And he did have a very good spring. So the one other one that was somewhat interesting was Andre Turrentine. Had only spent 1 year at Ohio State, I believe. And according to Dan Hope, our good friend from 11 Warriors, he played something like 106 plays out of a possible 122 in the spring game, which doesn't even seem possible. But I guess maybe Perry Eliano forgot to take him out of the game and just kind of left him on cruise control. So I don't know what to make of that. They play you 100 plays and it's not enough for you, apparently. So I don't know what to make of that situation. But I think I've covered all the new portal entries and where some of the old portal entries are headed. And again, as I said, I didn't, other than Noah Potter, I don't think I had anybody in there who figured to play a whole lot this coming season.
Yeah, I mean, all the names have been mentioned there, so I'm not going to have any of those to go through, but you have to get to 85, and honestly, it's more likely that Ohio State, in terms of its current makeup, gets down closer to 83, 82. I mean, it's a two-way street. I mean, there are going to be guys that there are going to be conversations that are going to be had with, and even if the coaching staff's like, you should probably stick it out another year, they may say, well, I just kind of see how the handwriting is on the wall. I mean, I find it very interesting They're going to be playing 3 safeties. They've just recently lost 3 safeties. That just shows the amount of depth. It shows the addition of Tanner McAllister coming in via the portal. It shows the emergence, of what we've seen in a very small sample size of Kai Stokes. I think that they're guys that are recognizing that they may not have, they put in their time, to various amounts, and they may not be, they may not get the reward at the end of the rainbow. So they're going to go look somewhere else to where, these are all talented guys. It's not like we're seeing a bunch of these guys going and going down a classification, going down to FCS, going down to something like that. They're all landing at Power 5 programs, more or less. I mean, Memphis is in the American, which, would like to say Power 6, but, I think that's a good fit for Cormonte Hamilton going back, being reunited with Matt Barnes, going home. He's originally from Memphis. So, you get invested in these players. They come in, and it's just going to have you're going to have that kind of churn. The one thing that I do say though is that while most people have been pretty cool about it on social media, there's always going to be the couple of trolls out there that's like, "Good, get out." That doesn't serve anybody any purpose. So knock that blank off.
Yeah, when Bryson Shaw's dad announced that his son Bryson had landed at USC, I didn't bother retweeting it because I try to protect the parents from replies from Buckeye fans where it concerns certain players. And so then, because then I saw some of the replies to the dad, and it's like, good luck. Bryson just needs to continue to work on his angles and get his speed up and make sure he tackles better. And poor dad just has to be like, thank you for your support. Thanks. We'll pass that along to the coach. Like, I try, I hate seeing the players that get just bombarded with critiques and stuff like that. Like, why do you tell the dad, hey, good luck, but here's what your son just needs, as long as he continues to work on that? Are you Lincoln Riley? Are you Lincoln Riley responding to that tweet? No. Obviously they know what things didn't go great, and I they can say what they want. I don't think the Shaws are leaving with a great taste of Ohio State in their mouth based on social media, and that's not I don't think the Shaws will be alone in that. But everybody transfers here, in my opinion. The transfers that we've seen, they've all got at least 3 guys ahead of them. Even Andre Turrentine, who had just Josh Proctor ahead of him at strong safety in the spring game. That's because Court Williams was out, Lathan Ransom is out, and Sonny Styles isn't here yet. So he's going to be battling with Sonny Styles to be the 4th strong safety. And he was going to have to battle probably with Marcus Hooker as well. And of course, Marcus Hooker is gone. Bryson Shaw was playing strong safety in the spring, and he left. So these are all guys that saw big Hollywood letters written on the wall to let you know that, well, we've got 3 guys that we like a strong safety. The issue is, I guess, not enough of them can play free safety because you've got Kai Stokes, it looks like the number 2, and we'll have to figure out what's going on there as well. Jansen Dunn, they need to get him back and healthy. And then even Legend Cavazos transfers because they move him from corner. They don't need him at corner anymore, and they move him to nickel where he's got 2 guys ahead of him. And there's not going to be a lot of playing time for him. And Colby Cowan, he's been injured his entire career, and trying to make his way at defensive end at Ohio State isn't easy. Noah Potter, they moved him from defensive end to defensive tackle last year because there are too many defensive ends. Now they've got plenty of defensive tackles. He's a man without a home, even though he played well in the spring game. So these losses are, it's the Ohio State isn't going to be feeling them. Like, they're not going to be missing them on the field. They'll be missing them more off the field if these are all high character guys. And it sounds strange to say about your 3rd leading tackler in Bryson Shaw, but again, he was in there because Josh Proctor was hurt, and he played, I don't know, 1 or 2 games before that in his career, and wasn't equipped for what they had him doing. I thought he would have been much better at strong safety this year, and not that he would have been starting because they've got guys that they like there. So I'm happy that the players are all finding spots. I know there's a lot to do about the 45% of players that enter the portal who never find a home. And we can get into that if you want at some point, one of these shows. But I also think going to the portal is one of the new ways that players quit. And players quit every year, and they quit before the portal. This is just another way of doing that. And not that the Ohio State players entering the portal are quitting, but I think there's a lot to be there's too much being made about players getting stuck in a portal.
Couple questions here. One comes to mind is that, of course, the deadline for entry into the transfer portal is coming up this Sunday, May 1st. Do we know what the deadline is for any player to announce and it be decided where they have landed?
You have to announce by May 1st to have that free year waiver, that the immediate eligibility. If you transfer after May 1st, you could still be immediately eligible. You just have to get waivers from the school you're leaving, that sort of thing, or the NCAA or whatever. So it's the automatic eligibility is the May 1st deadline.
I'm just curious.
I don't think you have to set your destination by May 1st. I think you just have to be in the portal by May 1st.
Yeah.
And give notice to your current school.
Sure. Okay, so there's no deadline necessarily on announcing a landing spot.
No,
and
there's
making that.
nothing mandated with that. I mean, obviously, you want to do your due diligence and get through with that so you can start making progress toward getting to your new school. But there's not an artificial deadline that is in play to where you have to be out of the portal, that they're going to hose it out and get it ready for the next round of kids. You can stay in there until you're ready.
Yeah, for Ohio State, what's important is about June 5, 6, 7, I think, is when they start summer semester. Mm-hmm. So that's when guys want to be enrolled at Ohio State, because then they can go through the summer conditioning program and start getting some credit hours at Ohio State and get their feet wet. And they actually have another summer session that starts a few weeks after that some guys arrive at as well sometimes. But those are kind of if you're coming to Ohio State, they would really like you to be there by early June so that you can go through the Mickey Marotti training session.
Unless your name is JT Tuimoloau, then they will take you in July.
Yes. August 1st, no problem.
You can do that if you're him, or in a different set of circumstances, Quinn Ewers, and show up 2 weeks into camp.
As long as you bring the kombucha.
Another great example.
So this doesn't matter, but I'm just a bit curious. Do any of you know how involved that process is of filling out is that as simple as going on a database and saying Mark Rogers, student ID, XYZ, boom? Or is it like filling out a tax form? How involved is this process?
I think it's kind of boilerplate form, but then it goes to the NC2A office, and then the NC2A office generates, okay, you're in the portal, and when that happens, you're allowed to be contacted by other universities, because if not, that is tampering. Yep. So, you don't have to sit there and provide blood type and mother's maiden name and a bunch of things like that, but it's just not flipping a switch either. I think there's actually a little bit of a boilerplate form.
I heard Pat Narduzzi on the radio this morning talking about Jordan Addison, their receiver, Biletnikoff winner, who's back. And the question was asked, did you have to, how hard did you have to work to keep him from transferring? And Narduzzi said, it's not about keeping the player, it's about keeping these other schools out. He said 12 different schools contacted Addison, which is not supposed to happen, because that's you can't contact other teams' players. And he said that you deal with that as well, and that's not even part of the transfer portal thing that we're talking about, where this does happen, and then the player goes to the portal and then they go where they want. The back channel stuff has always happened, but now this free year thing, coaches are weaponizing it as much as players at times. And not that current team's coach, the future team's coach, the future players' coach, somebody trying to get the Jordan Addison, they can weaponize that immediate eligibility as well.
So in asking Brady's question below, I have a kind of an extension off this question. So if you guys want to address anybody in particular that you know that's visiting or that Ohio State's interested in, certainly we'll get to that. But also I got to figure that the net gain of talent in this exchange, if you consider everybody that's entered the transfer portal in recent months from Ohio State versus the kind of player that they're going to attract and target and bring in, that the net gain from a talent standpoint is going to be in Ohio State's favor.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and taking Joe Burrow out of the situation because there was no transfer portal at that point. But you're thinking they would just all of the guys we mentioned, go ahead and lump in Jamison Williams, but that still doesn't compare to the Justin Fields, the Jonah Jackson, the Trey Sermon that they have landed as transfers over the past few years. Like, if this was a trade, it would be an uneven trade in Ohio State's favor, in my opinion.
So more specifically to Brady's question, is there anybody out there that's currently in the transfer portal that you think is a target for the Buckeyes?
I don't really monitor the portal outside of Ohio State, guys, so I couldn't tell you necessarily who's sitting out there in the portal. I mean, people are going to sit there and say tight end. Do they try to bring in somebody at tight end? Do they try and bring in some OL depth? Do you try and bring in a fourth scholarship quarterback? But at that point, you're looking at like a Gunnar Hoke type of situation or something along those lines. It's not. This isn't like basketball to where everybody is waiting to see what a Tanner Holden was doing or somebody like that. I mean, it's such a larger portal in terms of football, and it's a lot of names are thrown in there. And the thing too is that you're going to have situations where you're going to have the transfers of high power 5 to high power 5. You're not going to see a lot of situations of where Ohio State's going to be looking at that lower level guy that just suddenly blew up. That's going to be playing up. I mean, that happens more in terms of basketball. That's not really something that happens in football. I mean, occasionally you might see somebody come out of one of the North Dakota schools or something like that, just with their track records. But, I don't know if Tom and Tony have anything else, but I'm not monitoring any names. There's not an Eli Ricks.
Steve and Tony.
Steven.
I live in Pataskala. I don't live with the hoity-toity people out in Granville like your friend Tom does.
I've done too many shows with Tom and Tony. My brain is.
Oh, hey, Tom's a good dude.
Evan's on autopilot. This is going to be a running joke, I think.
Tom's a good dude. Just call me Tom.
The one name out there in the portal that has actually visited Ohio State is the USC kicker, Parker Lewis.
Yeah.
He can't lose.
He cannot lose, which is a reference that I don't know how many people actually get anymore nowadays with these young whippersnappers out there.
I don't get it. Parker Lewis, he cannot lose.
Weren't you watching Fox in the 80s?
Late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, I was watching the Bundys, Married with Children, definitely, and The Simpsons, and that's about as far as I went. So
you never watched Parker Lewis Can't Lose, the TV show?
No, I don't remember that one. That one slipped by me.
Is that this kid's name, Parker Lewis?
Yes.
Okay, well, he can't lose.
He can't lose, but he did. He was a 2-year starter at USC as their kicker, and entered the portal in December. Visited for the spring game. So Ohio State is looking at him. Would they have 3 scholarship kickers on the roster? They've got room if they need it. So that's one guy to look for as they continue to show that they don't have a ton of faith, I think, in Jake Seibert.
All right. Welcome to Buckeyes Live. We're here every Wednesday, typically at 1:30 Eastern Time. Sometimes we've got to switch up. We've got to organize and collaborate and corroborate with 4 different schedules. I think that's the word I was looking for. So there you go. So here we are at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with all of you. So leave those comments and questions in the live chat, and keep in mind that the super chat's available to show your appreciation for these 3 making this work each and every week. 156 consecutive times. Wow, that's like 3 years. 3 times 52.
Next week will be the anniversary.
Look at that.
It's like 7% of my life I've spent doing this.
All right. There's an age joke there somewhere I could
But
grasp
I will
at,
not be
but,
here the next several weeks because I'm going to Europe to
exactly.
visit my daughters. So
It's only going to be like 6.4% when you get
yeah,
back.
one of them's teaching in Spain, and the other one is at Miami University's campus that they have in Luxembourg. So we're going Atlanta, then to Spain, then to France, to Paris for a day, then to Luxembourg to scoop her up, and to go to London, and then to fly home. So it'll be a whirlwind 2-week trip. Can't, as the guy said from the Steelers, can't wait. So here we go.
I'll help myself to your beer fridge while you're gone.
Yeah. For feeling there's going to be a lot of help yourself going on over here. We will have relatives here at the house, including my son. So there you go.
Well, you can forget we exist and Ohio State exists and go have a good time.
Yep. Planning to. And I'm sure there'll be 8 more transfer portal moves between football and basketball between now and then.
Hey, I was in the Dominican Republic when JT Tuimoloau out committed, so there you go.
There you go.
So before we move on from the transfer portal discussion, I'll throw this out there. Where would be the designated areas to target? I got to think Kevin mentioned tight end, and that may have just been as an example. Maybe extra offensive line from a depth standpoint, and then the rest, I can't think. Defensive line, I got to think maybe linebacker and secondary, maybe.
Well, the problem with bringing in backups, I mean, is that they're going to be a backup because you're not bringing in somebody saying you're coming in to start. Because Jonah Jackson knew he was coming in and there was going to be a spot for him right there. Ohio State has a very solid starting 5. I would say Ohio State's probably, I'd say 7 deep on the offensive line. You would still love to have some depth there, but are you going to be able to sit there and go and lure Alabama or Clemson offensive lineman to come over to Ohio State to sit there and sit on the second team when they probably were second team where they were at? I mean, I don't know. So, it's not always a one-to-one situation of Ohio State's had this fantastic success in landing guys like Justin Fields and so on and so forth. I mean, offensive line is not a position that you normally rotate a bunch. You can come in as Trey Sermon and be a 1A to a 1 in terms of running back and then go nuts at the end of the season and become the 1 yourself. But, I don't know. We're at tight end. I don't know if we necessarily have a clear leader emerging. I mean, if they're able to go get a rock star tight end, what's to say that you couldn't get there and see a lot of reps? Plus, too, I don't think Ohio State's going to play a lot of 12, but, I mean, there are certain situations where you have 2 tights out there anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Steve.
Tony.
No, go ahead.
I like offensive line as well. If you can find a Justin Jackson type, that can come in and play. Beyond that, is anybody really going to want to come to Ohio State to sit on the bench? I think that's one thing. I don't really. I mean, maybe a corner, maybe just as an insurance policy. But I think you're pretty well set. Otherwise, tight end, maybe. I think I'm not. You're always looking for an upgrade. I mean, you don't need depth. You've got plenty of depth. So I don't know. I don't see a tremendous need, but at the same time, when you only have 7 dependable offensive linemen, you could use an 8th, maybe. So, maybe kick the tires on somebody who's willing to come in and fight for a job and accept a backup job if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and that's a tough ask. And then when the player gets here and they see that it was more of a lure than a realistic shot at a job, that can create issues as well. So they're in a tough spot on the offensive line. The thing is, when you look at their successes that they've brought in, they had needs at those positions and they had openings. They did not have a quarterback when they got Justin Fields. They needed Jonah Jackson out in the interior of that offensive line. The incumbent, the number 1 running back when they went and got Trey Sermon was Master Teague, and we saw how that went. And so you look at this roster and it's like, where is that void to be able to bring in an impact transfer? And there isn't. And they were kicking the tires on tight ends in the portal before they moved Cade Stover over, because they probably didn't want to have to move Cade Stover. And when they couldn't find somebody in the portal, then, well, we know we have a guy that we like. And he was immediately the number one tight end in spring. So I think they're set there. And Steve, the cornerback is an interesting one, but we know they love their 2 second-year guys. And if Cameron Brown can't stay healthy, then they still have somebody there that can step in. But they're not overly deep at corner because they've got 2 proven guys in Cameron Brown and Denzel Burke, if you want to call Cameron Brown proven. And then you've got 2 second-year guys who have played very little, and then 2 true freshmen. And so that's your cornerback room. And that's pretty thin. But again, you're going to ask somebody to come in and maybe see the field 4, 5, 6 times on defense this season, and maybe 3 to 12 plays a game. And that's not really a great sell job, no matter what kind of NIL incentives. And that's a whole other thing where, well, just NIL is going to change everything. Playing time is still going to change. Playing time is still going to be the decider in so much of what happens in college football.
Yeah, corners are kind of divas, and you're going to have a hard time convincing somebody to come in. And, the thing is you bring them in, what kind of message does that send to Ja'Kalen Johnson and to Jordan Hancock if you're bringing in a corner that thinks that they're going to shoehorn into that top 2, top 3 type of cut? So, there's a huge element of roster management as well. And, it goes back to the story of, if Ohio State would have really pursued Eli Ricks, what would that have done to the cornerback room? And, a lot of people will be like, well, if these guys don't want to compete, let them go somewhere else. Okay, it's great to be well-intentioned and have all those thoughts. Now let me introduce you to the real world where everything matters.
Well, and Ryan Day always talks about they have to fit the culture. And that was one of the amazing things about Jonah Jackson. He showed up and got along with everybody and wasn't big timing anybody. He came from Rutgers, so he was pretty thrilled to be at Ohio State, and, with the expectations of, wow, you guys get to win on a weekly basis. This will be amazing. And he endeared himself to his teammates. And so you need that aspect of it too. And so that's also a consideration. And then also you have to then compete against Alabama in the portal as well, which doesn't go great for many people.
And Miami these days, Life Wallet.
Life Wallet, yes.
Anytime the term's brought up culture, I get it. I understand what direction they're going in when they make that statement, but sometimes I would like to pin down a coach to say, okay, explain to us what your culture is. Another discussion for another time. Another big topic right here brought up by Sue. Sue, we appreciate you being here, and a number of other regulars to the show. Any thoughts on Mark Emmert stepping down NCAA president since 2010? Could the NCAA finally get a leader that will help with all this craziness in college football? I believe she's alluding to the transfer portal / NIL in particular, which obviously the Johnny Manziel situation is the paramount situation that comes to mind concerning NIL that I think started to become a catalyst, years down the road for a lot of this. So I'll say this briefly before I cut you guys loose. I am the least when it comes to being any kind of visionary. But when that Johnny Manziel situation came down, I posted videos saying somebody needs to get on top of this now because the floodgates are coming, and we live in a society when all of us can benefit in whatever way, however legit or stupid it is to get on TikTok or Instagram and make a fool of ourselves and make a buck if people find value in it. And so these athletes should be able to do the same thing, or should be able to sign an autograph and say, here, $5, that's what it's worth, or 50. So let's get on top of this now, rather than having this just become the wild, wild west. Get the schools involved, get the conferences involved, because the conference commissioners seem to be running the sport. and this could all be organized and rolled out in a semi. It's always going to be kind of awkward. It's always going to be a little need to be adjusted and tweaked down the line because nobody can foresee the future, but at least get a structure model in place and show that the student athlete that people are actually looking out for them before they're forced to have to do something would have probably been a step in the right direction as well.
Yeah, what a mess the whole thing is. And Sue's question there about Emmert stepping down and could the NCAA finally get a leader kind of goes part and parcel with what you're talking about. And it's not really who the leader of the NCAA is, because that person can only do so much. That person can bring ideas and concepts and rule changes to the table, but it's the actual schools, the universities, and the conferences that enact the legislation and make the wholesale changes to the rules. And, for years, we had this idea that it was this bureaucratic dark hand in Indianapolis that moved all these chess pieces and made these crazy rules and enforced them and whatever. Well, in the last 10 years, the schools wrestled away control of the NCAA from the bureaucrats in Indianapolis and said, no, we've got a better way. But the problem is nobody knows what the better way is. And there is no commissioner of college football, commissioner of college basketball. I heard this was 3 or 4 years ago, Mike Krzyzewski was on his radio show on Sirius, and he said, what we need is one person to lead us and guide us out of the darkness and into the sunlight in a common sense manner. And it's just not set up like that. Emmert's replacement is not going to be the commissioner of college sports. It's just going to be the president of the NCAA and still have the same kind of minimal power to enact any kind of real change, basically just a figurehead to present trophies and say stupid stuff and,
not punish Kentucky.
Not punish Kentucky, not punish Kansas. And, I was talking with an assistant coach at a Big Ten school the other day, and his basketball, and he said, all you need to know about our industry is that Kansas just won the national championship. That just kind of tells you everything you need to know, that the whole thing is, people support this to the nth degree. There'll be 105,000 people at the Ohio State Notre Dame game, in spite of the fact the game is rigged. And by that, I don't mean that specific football game. I mean recruiting and the entire infrastructure of the sport and college sports in general is rigged. And there's only 10 schools capable of winning a football championship and only maybe 20 capable of winning a basketball championship. And that's it. So, we see it, we hear rumors about it, and we allude to it. But again, I asked Chris Holtman this question years ago when Thad Matta leaves, and Thad subsequently told Bill Landis, our good friend from The Athletic, people were paying recruits off or whatever was in that report, and they had to stave people off with a fork to get them away from D'Angelo Russell at the 11th hour so that he'd sign with Ohio State still, because other people wanted to pay him. And he's like, I'm still going to Ohio State. I don't care. The problem is if you are aware that schools are buying players, why aren't the coaches dropping the dime on their fellow coaches? They want to complain about it, but if you've got evidence or texts or whatever that indicate somebody's stealing players from out from under you by illicit means, then by all means, turn them in. Don't come crying to me about it. Turn them in. Nobody ever does, though. So
yeah, that's one of the huge problems I have with the complaining in college basketball from the coaches. It's not the mafia. You don't have to worry about getting whacked for dropping a dime on somebody. You're all supposed to be following the rules. So if you want to make sure somebody else follows the rules, make the rulers, the lawmakers and lawgivers, make them aware of this cheating, give them the proof, and boom, you start to fix it. And I think for a lot of the coaches, the reason they don't want to drop any dimes is because there are also dimes that can be dropped on them. Now, Thad, I don't think anybody would say that about Thad. in terms of, he always did things the right way as far as I knew, as far as I've been told, and was one of the vocal people against players being bought. But again, as Steve said, go tell the people that matter, and if you wanted to change it. Now, the NIL stuff, the all of this craziness, the Mark Emmert stuff, like you go the UCF kicker back in 2017 who had to give up his scholarship because he was making money on YouTube, and the NCAA, he was ruled ineligible by UCF because of NCAA rules. Like, that is so dumb, and that never had to happen. And the zero tolerance, the letter of the law, all of this stuff from the NCAA throughout has brought all of this on. And it keeps going back to the old Simpsons thing where Ned Flanders' parents are trying to get their kid under control, and they're telling the psychologist, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. And that's what Emmert and the NCAA, and they've just kept kicking the can, and now the can is kicking back.
I don't want to sit here and become some big defender of Mark Emmert, because that's not how I feel. But a lot of these changes that have gone in have been the Division I Council and everything else are making these decisions, and Mark Emmert's just sitting there going, okay. I mean, it's just like a conference commissioner is put in place by university presidents, and it's easy to vilify this guy or that guy, but you kind of created that monster. Honestly, Mark Emmert and his $3 million salary need to go to enforcement and have something a little bit better there in terms of, if you're going to try and have even a semi-level playing field, you need to have more than like 6 people in the enforcement department. We bring up Kansas, we can bring up, hell, North Carolina had its whole academic fraud case, and there was a smoking gun and a body in the trunk and nothing happened. It's obvious that the NC2A really doesn't have any teeth, and quite honestly, I think the next president of the NC2A might be the last president of the NC2A, as we are rapidly spinning towards some sort of other governing fashion.
Yeah, and I don't know who I heard say it today, but you basically need commissioners of each sport. And you need a college football commissioner, and probably a commissioner of the breakaway autonomous 5 or whatever, commissioner of men's basketball, commissioner of women's basketball. You can't just have like one person trying to oversee all of this, and not that Emmert did any overseeing, but you need, I think, more hands-on, and there's certainly enough money out there, I think, to make that happen.
And then those individuals need to be connected, and they need to be in sync, because you can't have, you have to have continuity in guidelines and rules among athletes generally across the board. Yeah, I wasn't insinuating that Mark Emmert could have, gotten in front of NIL, but he could at least be a voice. He certainly was somebody that had a voice.
He could have been throwing out ideas.
Yeah, that he could have controlled it himself. But yes,
instead of just throwing up his hands.
Yes. Thanks for the question, Sue. Appreciate that. Yakov 22, appreciate you being here as always. CNN Plus dead. Took about 2 weeks to blow $500 billion, from what I understand. Netflix dying. This show thriving. Yes, Yakov. That inspires me to maybe send out a tweet showing the percentage stock loss for Netflix and CNN Plus and their demise and our growth in comparison. Yes, that would be
taking the show public.
Apples. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we're just about ready to do that. Sure. All right. I got an idea. I got 2 excellent ideas for show topics going forward. One would be reviewing signing classes from the past, going year by year, taking 1 year each week. Love to get your guys' thoughts on, who were the 5 stars that.
Yep. I did a whole series on that during COVID because I had nothing else to write about. So I could forward you all the links for the homework assignment, and we could come in and debate it and talk about it. I talked about, who even tracked how they did, and even on to where they got drafted. I mean, it was, and I kind of ranked the classes based on all those different variables, like what the recruiting rankings had for them, and then how many starter seasons the class produced, all Big Ten awards, all American awards, and then drafted. And, it was quite an undertaking. I think the 2002 class with Troy Smith and Justin Zwick and Maurice Claret and
AJ Hawk,
Quinn Pitcock, a cast of thousands. That was one of the better classes, obviously. And then recently the Bosa Ezekiel Elliott class, what was that, 2013, was really good. But there was another one somewhere in there that was just as good as that one. So those are the three that really stand out from Ohio State's standpoint. But we can work on that for the future, perhaps.
So what you need to do, Steve, is you need to reach out to all the other 247
and have them do that.
Have them do the same thing, and you put them all together and you re-rank every class.
What you need to do is reach out to Fauci and bring back COVID. And if that Kevin is saying, no, you are not either reaching out to Fauci, and you are not either bringing back COVID. But yeah, that was just something because I had a quota to fill, and I had nothing to write about. So yeah, it was it filled up a whole month, so that was good. But yeah,
that's really good stuff. Because I think of that all the time. I look up the 2015 year and see that Alabama was 1 and Ohio State was 2 or whatever it was, and think, well, yeah, that's obviously, and that's probably close to what it turned out to be. But I would love to know, okay, who outdeveloped their recruiting ranking and who underachieved, and let's re-rank this. But I understand that's a ridiculous process for somebody to take on for 130 teams. Then the other one that came to mind while you guys were talking about, the current state of NIL and transfer portal versus what Jim Tressel and that situation in 2010, that would have been nothing today. That would have been, what would have resulted in, that completely changed a coaching career that certainly Urban Meyer stepped in and did great things, and now Ryan Day. But Jim Tressel had a pretty damn good coaching career as well, winning close to 90% of his games. And that was derailed after a 12-1 Big Ten championship, number 5 ranking team that won the Sugar Bowl. He was on a pretty good roll himself.
No doubt.
That stuff would have been a recruiting enticement instead of costing them 3 scholarships a year for 3 years.
Oh, man. Do we know anything about the San Jose State game, the much anticipated 2023 matchup that's been replaced by Youngstown State? The Rod Farr was asking.
The only supposition I have is somebody posted that presumably the Mountain West gave them a schedule that sends them also to Hawaii in those first 3 weeks of that season. And it's possibly a case where San Jose State, because that's kind of etched in stone by your conference, came to Ohio State and said, we can't be coming 3 time zones one way and then go 2 time zones the other way. So perhaps that's why they asked, by mutual consent, they agreed to drop that. And the Youngstown State thing really 2 days ago came out of nowhere. And it'll be the 3rd time they're going to play Youngstown State, which is a 1AA school. I think they also played Florida A&M was a 1AA one time. And I think those are the only 1AAs or FCS schools, I guess they call them now, that Ohio State's ever played, unless I'm just completely missing one. But, it is what it is. Everybody plays them. I think USC, Notre Dame may be the only FBS schools that haven't played them. I think USC's taken the plunge here with Cal Davis or somebody here at some point. So, not that big a deal. I mean, the SEC schools all typically play one the week before they play their rival in late November or at some point in the season. Citadel, Charleston Southern. So it's really not that. Some of them play 2. It's really not that big of a deal. I mean, how big of a leap is it from playing New Mexico State, which is barely FBS, to playing Youngstown State, which is FCS? Not a great FCS program. They've really had a bad 15-year run since, well, how many years has it been? Yeah. Since whenever Tressel left there, God, that would have been almost 20-year run. They really haven't been very good for 20 years since Tressel left there. But, whatever. Keeps the money in state. So what can you do?
And then before we say goodbye, Shay's asking about Austin Siereveld, interior offensive lineman, guard center out of Lakota East, Middletown, Ohio, committed to the Buckeyes, top 20 player at his position. Is there any reason why there should be concern about losing him?
He hasn't committed. He's announcing on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. That's a crystal ball. My bad.
Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State
Are his three. You can make some arguments for Notre Dame. You can make some arguments for Ohio State. The news of his decision date just happened about an hour before we went on the air. I've not really had a chance to double back with anybody, so I am not ready to make an announcement on what my pick is yet.
Okay.
I got to think Ohio State has the inside track, just as a guess. He is saying Wednesday, May 4th, mark your calendar, 3:15 p.m. at the Lakota East High School, and it will be streaming live on the CBS Sports HQ platform. So mark your calendar for that, 3:15, May 4th, CBS Sports HQ.
All right. Another show in the books. Steve, where can folks find you? What have you been up to?
You'll find me in Europe. Before I know it, a week from now, I'm going to be in Europe. But at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter, and bucknuts.com is our website. We're going to a press conference here shortly with Chris Holtman and Malachi Branham. I don't think there's going to be any special surprises that he's coming back. I think more for Holtman to hold up Simba, I call him Simba, is theoretically to say, look what we did. He was developed here, type thing as a recruiting tool. There'll be plenty of recruiting fireworks made with that little presentation, I think. But heaven forbid, if he does decide to come back, then, then take Ohio State in your office pool next year. But otherwise, going to be another 20-win season probably next year.
Tony.
Just recorded a podcast today, Buckeye Weekly Podcast. We'll be dropping that shortly, and you can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. If you are in Europe and you want to look for Steve, just look for the guy wearing the 24/7 shirt and the beret.
You need to wear the beret some weeks, Steve.
I know,
but it's going to say Rusty
show.
Like from European Vacation.
That's too
far
much.
the least successful of the vacation movies. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. You can find me on the Big Meat Kickoff. We will do a Friday show wrapping up round 1 of the NFL draft because we never made it to talking about the NFL draft today. I will be shifting gears to a lot of recruiting coverage here for a couple of weeks, starting next week. Be sure to follow my Twitter and keep up with me at Buckeye Scoop to find out what it is I have in store in terms of a series.
Are you going to Southern Swing?
You'll have to wait and see what I have in terms of
You have to read the scoop to find out.
You'll just have to subscribe to Buckeye Scoop.
There you go.
And folks, again, I say this all the time. Try to reserve myself, but I got to say it at least once each week. This is a phenomenal show because of these three. So please show your appreciation. Get some more folks on in here. Let them know that we're here every Wednesday. And, of course, follow them at their respective platforms. Guys, we appreciate it. Steve, you go enjoy. Be safe. Be prosperous. Have a great time. And we will hopefully do it again for a 157th time next week.
Sounds good.